Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this webinar in celebration of Cambodia's Independence Day 2020. The title of the webinar is Cambodian Independence Day, the Evolution of its Significance Through Different Cambodian Political Regimes by Mr. Duong Keo of the History Department of the Royal University of Phnom Penh, Cambodia, a PhD candidate at the Bundeswehr University at Munich, Germany. So before we begin, I have to mention that the views expressed in this webinar are those of the speaker and not necessarily of SIHNAOUK. We will have an open forum at the end of the webinar, and Zoom participants may post their questions in the chat box or the Q&A box at any time during the webinar. Okay. Now, if you would prefer to speak, there's a button where which you can use to raise your hand, and I can allow you to speak if you would prefer to do so. So let me begin by introducing the Southeast Asia Research Center and Hub. For those who are unacquainted, the Southeast Asia Research Center and Hub, or SEARCH, is a research center based in De La Salle University, Manila, Philippines. Our mission vision is to become a cutting-edge research center and networking hub that addresses regional concerns and serves as a social advocacy arm for De La Salle, Philippines. It is our role to generate Southeast Asian research, collaborate with specialists, network with other centers and institutes of Southeast Asian studies, provide resource materials, and serve as a hub for all matters concerning Southeast Asia. It is our goal to be a research center of, for, and by Southeast Asians. Please follow us on Facebook by liking the De La Salle University Southeast Asia Research Center and Hub page. So I now have the pleasure to introduce our speaker this afternoon. Our speaker is a lecturer at the History Department of the Royal University of Phnom Penh. He obtained his Bachelor of Arts in History from the Royal University of Phnom Penh, Cambodia, and Master of Arts in Southeast Asian Studies at Chulalongkorn University, Thailand. He published a book entitled Khmer Rouge, Nationalism and Mass Killing, Perceptions of the Vietnamese. Most of his works are on the history of Democratic Kampuchea, genocide, and post-genocide regimes, oral history of ethnic Vietnamese living in Cambodia, textbooks, and national history. He currently holds a grant from the Gerda Henkel Foundation to do his PhD research in Bundeswehr University Munich, Germany. So without much further ado, ladies and gentlemen, it's my pleasure to introduce Mr. Duong Keo.
Thank you very much for your nice introduction, Dr. Fernando. And good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. So I'm very pleased to be invited by Dr. Fernando to give a talk on this very nice occasion of Cambodian Independence Day. So I'm gonna share my PowerPoint and we'll start it soon. Yep. Okay. So can you see my PowerPoints?
Yes.
Oh, thank you. Okay, thank you so much. And again, I'm Keo Duong. I'm from History Department, Royal University of Phnom Penh, and now I'm a PhD candidate of Bundeswehr University Munich, Germany. But I'm still based here in Phnom Penh, Cambodia. So my talk today on the occasion of Cambodian Independence Day, the 67th anniversary, is about Cambodian Independence Day, of course, and the evolution of its significance through different Cambodian political regimes. And I'm very thankful to the De La Salle University in the Philippines and Dr. Fernando for giving me this chance to talk about this topic. Just a quick update on what happened here in Cambodia this morning. So you can see the poster, very nice poster with the independent monument, the iconic monument to symbolize Independence Day, and attached with the kings, the late King Norodom Sihanouk over here. And this morning there's a big celebration here with national TV live on Facebook, and you can see here quite a number of people watch on Facebook too. And from King, the current king also celebrated at the ceremony, and also on his Facebook page, the Prime Minister and also the ordinary people also celebrating the Independence Day through their Facebook account. So when get up in the morning, scrolling on the Facebook feed and see a lot of friends post, and even they change the Facebook profile. Here I just want to highlight that the enthusiastic of Cambodian people also still have given the value of the Independence Day as it is celebrated today. But what I'm gonna talk about this afternoon is about Cambodian history, mostly how the significance of the Independence Day have evolved over time, over different political regimes. So I will start with the very brief historical background of Cambodia, then move to how the Independence Day has been celebrated during the SIHNAOUK regimes, during the 50s and the 60s, and then move to the time in which Independence Day was forgotten during the time for three main political regimes from 1970 to 1989. So this time in which Independence Day has been forgotten, and then back to the Independent Day of the current regimes since 1993 onwards. So I will do it chronologically for this. Very brief to this. You can see that Cambodian history has been changed political regime very often. I would say, comparing to a country in Southeast Asia, Cambodia may be the one who the most changing political regime. Like you can see that we have been under French colonization, or officially called French protectorate, for 90 years, from 1863 to 1953, up until this day, the day in which the 9th November 1953, we gained independence from the French. Following the independence, we can see many political regime followings here. The regimes under Prince Sihanouk, after he abdicated and he took power for 15 years, it was, I would call, peace island during the time. But then followed by the three periods that followed by civil war. I mark it different color. Mass murder during the Khmer rule or Pol Pot regime, officially called Democratic Kampuchea, in which nearly 2 million people died during the time. And even after the fall of the Khmer rule, we still have a long history of civil war. From 1979 to 1998, almost 20 years. And then we come to today's regimes in which peace and stability has been brought for Cambodia up until now for more than 20 years. So this is a brief look at Cambodian history, how the political regime have changed, and I will introduce to you how at the same time the Independence Day also changed through these political regimes. During the SIHNAOUK time, during the time of Prince Sihanouk was in power, from 1955 to 1970, no doubt that the 9th November 1953, the anniversary of Independence Day, have been celebrated very strongly, and the day of the National Day, and the Independence Day has been personalized, I would say, not on, maybe use the term personalized wrong, but have been attached to the kings as an heroes, not different from other country in which you gain independence from European colonizers, and the leader become the national heroes. In the Philippines, in Indonesia, in Myanmar, in Vietnam, likewise in Cambodia. The same in Cambodia, that the king has been called or named as a national hero who brought the independence to Cambodia. So the attachment to the king also need the king power and the king influence to keep the significance of the the Independence Day. Here I just remind that during the 50 and 60, the king has been called the father of independence and has been interrupted following a regime, and back to today regime we call him again as the father of independence. But what happened in 1970s? So in 1970, on the 18th March 1970, Prince Sihanouk have been overthrown from the head of state, and his power was not there at the government any longer, and changed from monarchy to republic. So the monarchy that has been in Cambodia for nearly 2,000 years have been ended by the coup on 18 March 1970. At the same time, also the new government forget the narrative of Prince Sihanouk as the father of independence. But when talking about how Cambodia get independent from the front, they giving the new narrative of this group called Free Khmer. Instead of talking about Prince Sihanouk, the King Sihanouk as the key person to bring Cambodian independence. So one, they forget the day of independence, having the new day, and also they change the narrative of history to focus on the Free Khmer movement instead of the kings. Similarly to this period after Lon Nol regime, I mean the regime from 1970 to 1975, and then go to commonly called Pol Pot regime or Khmer Rouge regime or Democratic Kampuchea, that ruled the country from 1975 to 1979. Very similarly is that first they changed the date that they took power. They took power, they marched to Phnom Penh and end the government and took power on April 17 April 1975. They call it not the Independence Day, but they call it as a Liberation Day, and become a national day in Cambodia during this period. And what they call it as a Liberation Day was the they claim that the country has been liberated from 1,000 years of suppression and inequality, as this regime is a communist regime. They talked about suppression from the rich people, the imperialists, what they call, and inequality in as have been brought into the country for 1,000 years, what they have claimed. So again, this is the new date and the new day for the National Day, and they also forget the Independence Day. The following regimes, when they overthrow the, it's called, when they overthrow the Khmer Rouge in 1979, still a communist regime. It called People Republic of Kampuchea from 1979 to 1989. Also forget the narrative of Prince Sihanouk as a father of independence, but presenting the role of Vietnam. Here I highlight here, this is a textbook in Khmer. The role of Vietnam, Cambodia and Laos as a communist movement, by saying that those communist movement was the key group to push for independence, to make the front give Cambodian independence. So this is the narrative also been changed. And then the new date is the 7th century 1979, in which they call that the day to end the Khmer Rouge regime, and call it as a the Liberation Day, in which the country has been liberated from what they call genocide regime. And it's become a second birthday for Cambodian people, because during the regime of the Khmer Rouge 1975-1979, people was treated badly, many people was executed, many people died. So the new regime assumed that without this day, people would have been all killed by the previous regime. So they consider it as a second birthday. So this 7th century 1979 become a very important day for the new regime. But what happened when Cambodian got peace agreement in 1991? And then after getting peace agreement, we have UN intervention and have the election in 1993, and the political regime the new political regime formed, and the king back on the thrones in 1993. The new constitution also come to place. So then what happened between these two dates? The 7th century 1979, as it is a very important day for the previous government, and would say the government ruled by Prime Minister Hun Sen. And the 9th November 1953, the day of independence from the front. This one is the day of what they call liberation from a genocide regime. So how the two days have class at the beginnings? If we read or look at how the discussion between the two dates is very tense, very the discussion at the beginning before giving which one is the Independence Day. This group, especially Cambodian People Party, claimed that 7th century 1979 should be a day for the National Day, because it is a very important day that liberate Cambodia from the genocide. But at the same time, during the time, in 1993, also the Function page, the son of the king, also see that this is a most important day after Independence Day. So what can we do with the two dates? So the discussion going on, and we can see that at the end, the 2 day become all as a national day in Cambodia, as it is a national holiday in Cambodia. 7th century people have to celebrate it, and there's no work is as a holiday, and 9 November also the holiday. So that's why I put it 7th century still celebrating it, but plus comeback of the 9 November at the Independence Day. And if you look at the textbook, also pretty much the same, means that the 2 date has been written in the national textbook as the most important day for Cambodian history. And this textbook, for example, this textbook also writes about the 7th century as a most important day, and also highlight the 3 leader, which is the current leader, except Mr. Chia Sim, who just passed away. We call it Somdat Chia Sim, who just passed away. So this means that the importance of the 7th century is very much important in the national history too. At the same time, the Independence Day also important for current textbook, that they present 4-page talking about the King SIHNAOUK, the late King SIHNAOUK movement to gain independence. The question why even King SIHNAOUK already passed away, but still political party, not only the government, but also the opposition, the former opposition party and other political party still respect the king, still want to celebrate the 9th, the 9th November, the Independence Day. What I see here is that all political parties try to link themselves with the kings, with the late king, to show their loyalty to the former kings and to show the loyalty to the current monarchies. To me, my other assumption is that many people who have lived through especially those who are old, lived through the regime of SIHNAOUK, still appreciates SIHNAOUK and believe that without the king, Cambodia would not be gain peace and stability. And this argument, we can come to very quickly to this point, that during this time, up until 1993, there was no king, and Cambodia was at civil war and mass murder and civil war. That's why many people still believe that the role of the king is still important to symbolize the peace and stability in Cambodia. But if you look at the number, the way in which 7 centuries and the 9th November have been celebrated, it's a bit different. Look at the number, we can see this is a huge celebration of the 7 centuries, what they call the Liberation Day from the genocide regime. The 40th anniversary was celebrated at National Museum, a very big one in 2019. But not only 2019 as the 40th anniversary, which was special, but this year, 2020, there also a big celebration in which thousands of people joined the celebration. So it look at the number is completely different from the celebration of the Independence Day, in which yes, the king participate, and many people also participate, but the number are quite different. What I can see the difference between the two is that the political implication of the day, the anniversary. The 7th January 1979 is a very important day for Cambodian People Party, the current government, as they claim that this is a very important day that they joined with Vietnamese force to liberate Cambodia from the Khmer, in which million of people dies, and that's called the second birthday of Cambodia. So this very much to links to the way in which the government use it to gain support from people. But for the celebration of the Independence Day, mostly to me is only the tradition, yes, the symbolization of Independence Day is only to show the loyalty to the monarchies and the late kings. As the current king, I would say the popularity of the current king cannot be comparable to the late kings. So let me go to a conclusion of my presentations. It's just kind of summary, and then for the conclusion is that when the regime changed, the value of the Independence Day also changed, because the Independence Day attached very much to the king SIHNAOUK and the monarchy. So when the monarchy out of the way, so when the narrative of the king was out of the way, it replaced by narrative of the communist group, for example, during the Khmer rule, the narrative of the free Khmer group or other individual who they claim that they really took part in gaining independence from the French. So the narrative of the SIHNAOUK as the only person to get independent from the French have been challenged from those political regimes. And each regime have their own new national day too. So the Independence Day actually is also perceived differently today, resulting from the different perspective has been drawn from the different political regimes. For the public opinions, normally people support very much to the Independence Day and agree that the Independence Day, the narrative that Prince SIHNAOUK alone who claimed the independence, but from the academics, there's still discussion about the contribution of the other group into the Independence Day, like the group of the communist group, the Free Khmer group, and the other individual who contribute to the Independence Day. So there's still a debate for those groups that talking about the Independence Day back to the 1953. But coming to the 7th century anniversary, seem to overvalue the Independence Day, since it is politically influential and part of the government's theory to gain support from people, and it is effective. Effective date that could gain support from people more than the Independence Day that have no direct connection to the current government, only only to show that the government still supports monarchies and the late kings and the current kings. So I say thank you for your attention, and yes, we happy to discuss more on this topic. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Duong. And it's now time for the open forum. Just a reminder to our guests, if you have any questions, you may use the raise hand button or you may type your question in the chat box. So before we proceed with, there's a hand that has been raised, but before I allow the person to speak, okay, first I'd like to raise my own question, and this has to do with the issue of decolonization, because decolonization is currently a popular concept in Southeast Asia, given that we had a common experience of being colonized by Westerners. So in the case of the Philippines, we were colonized by both Spain and the United States. And we were granted independence on the 4th of July, 1946. As an act of decolonizing, one of the things we did was to transfer our Independence Day from the 4th of July to June 12, which is when the Philippines, when we believe we gained independence when we won our revolution against Spain. And from then on, the decolonization effort has proceeded to rewriting our history books. We are aware that even universities can be pillars of coloniality. So sometimes we teach how we have been taught, and we have to be conscious that we have to remove the colonial vestiges. Um, in the case of Cambodia, you gained your independence from the French in 1953, on November 9, 1953. And has decolonization been an important issue as well among Cambodians, particularly Cambodian scholars?
Yeah, thank you for your question, Dr. Fernandez. I would see it from part of the research and perspective. The decolonization process in Cambodia have to do with the time of since the SIHNAOUK time. For example, in around 1968, we call it the Khmerization. The Khmerization was to give value to the Khmer language in the official writing and also in the textbook. As you may know that we influenced by the French, and the French language was not the language we are talking. We speak Khmer, but still a number of words have been borrowing from the French into Khmer. And even when I read the document during right after the independence, I sometimes cannot understand some word because they borrow several words from the French to write on the, for example, the note of the discussion at the National Assembly, for example. But then the Khmerization tried to use the Khmer word only in writing, in speaking. Yeah, so it started uh, to emerge about the decolonization on this language. At the same time, if we talk about language alone, the changing of the regime also kind of took part in decolonization, as after we in 1970 we was under the U.S. influence. The government was under the support from the U.S. and the language of the French seemed to be less important as English replaced them. For example, during the Khmer rule, no chance to study foreign language. And after the Khmer rule also, the foreign language was like the English and the French was not introduced or allowed. This is it's about the language, but also in terms of Cambodian intellectual, I also see that the attempt to decolonize from the front is that the front, the one who wrote Cambodian history, we did not have a complete history of Cambodia before the French came. But when the French came, they research and do some of the research, archaeology, all of those things, and then they come up with the textbook, with the history book. But Cambodian scholar still still protesting by writing a traditional way of history. For example, the Pung Savada, the Royal Chronicle. This is also the way of protesting the colonization. And also the emerge of a historian in the following regime, that some of the historian also reject some of the finding has been brought by the French in Cambodian history. But basically we still based on different I mean what different scholars have written about Cambodian history. Yeah, I think through the, not different from the independence day, through the changing of political regime, quite often the decolonization seem to work through those changing political regime too. What I still can see the influence is that we have like the identity of the great king. For example, when we're talking about the greatest king in Cambodian history, we talk about Jayavaraman the Seventh, back to the Angkor regime, Angkor periods, 1,000 years ago. That the French built it for. I mean, the French wrote the history and got those evidence showing that this king is the greatest king in Cambodia, and become an identity of the greatest king in Cambodia until today. Also, Angkor Wat, we know that Angkor Wat is a great temple, but the French who wrote history, who wrote about Angkor Wat and also publicized Angkor Wat to the world during the colonization, also part of a Cambodian identity until today, in which every Cambodian flag hold Angkor Wat, even if we change the political regimes. And I think many more that also still what we call the legacy of the colonization. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Now we have another question, and the person who would like to ask is Jama Cruz Araneta. So, ma'am, you may now unmute your microphone.
Good afternoon.
Yes, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Can you hear me, Fernando?
We can hear you, ma'am.
Yes, good afternoon, Fernando, and good afternoon, Professor Duong.
Thank you. Good afternoon.
I appreciate all your explanations about the Independence Day of Cambodia. But I would also like to share with you my experience with Cambodia. When I was in secondary school, that was the time when Norodom Sihanouk became the king of Cambodia in 1953. And I would hear stories that the French chose him because they thought they could manipulate him, because he was very young, playboy, very charismatic. So they thought they could control him as compared to his uncle, His Highness Sisowat Moniret, I think was the name, who was supposed to be the king, right?
Yep.
So they chose this young Norodom Sihanouk. But little did they know that he would fight relentlessly for the independence of Cambodia. In fact, he joined the non-aligned movement. in 1954, right? And that was really a no-no because that was the time of the Cold War, and the United States of America was very much against movements like that.
I see.
So do you know that he was sent, Prince Norodom Sihanouk was sent to Manila on a state visit in 1954 because the Americans wanted our president, Ramon Magsaysay, to convince him to leave the non-aligned movement. But
Oh,
of course, yes, but of course he didn't do that. And he very strictly complied with his own policies in defense of Cambodia. In fact, he was known as walking the tightrope. That was how he was described in those days. He was walking the tightrope because he would make political alliances that would be in the interest of Cambodia. So I think in the late 1960s, there was a U.S. Reconnaissance plane that was shot over Cambodia. Did you hear about that? Maybe you're
yeah,
too young
I
to
do.
hear about that.
My hometown also heavily bombed by the American bomb.
Yes, but this was in the beginning of the Vietnamese War. Anyway, so the plane was shot over Cambodia, and Norodom Sihanouk, he was then called Samdech Norodom Sihanouk. He had the two American pilots captured, and they were imprisoned. But then the year after, they were released in a very ceremonious way during the first International Film Festival in Phnom Penh.
Oh, oh,
Yeah, so it was a sensation. I was there, no? For
oh.
us Asians, it was a very bold move. Can you imagine shooting down an American plane, capturing their pilots, and then releasing them in this very dramatic way? That was really a slap on the face of the USA. So I wasn't surprised that in 1970, they supported General Lon Nol to overthrow Samdech Norodom Sihanouk. See? And
Yeah.
if you read the accounts of political analysts in those days, they say that when the US was withdrawing from Vietnam, they wanted to show strength by bombing Cambodia. That was
Yeah.
the story going around in those days. And I think it is true. It's true. That's what they did to Cambodia.
Yes, I
And,
think so. That what you share, because
mm-hmm,
the what I have read and what I have interviewed people, the survivor of the region also claim similarly
mm-hmm.
what you were saying, what are you talking about this? Yeah.
And, I was able to interview Samdech Norodom Sihanouk when he was exiled or taking refuge in China, in
Oh,
the People's Republic of China. I think that was in 1971, 72. So I
yeah.
happened to be visiting China then with a group of Filipino journalists, and then so I heard that he was there in China. So I asked if I could see him to interview him, and
Yeah.
he granted me that interview. And do you know who was there with him? Yeng Sari.
Sorry, exactly.
Yeng Sari was there. I was very surprised because he was supposed to be a Khmer Rouge,
Yeah,
right?
he support the Khmer troop by then.
Well, I guess that was how Norodom Sihanouk was walking a tightrope, just for the interest of Cambodia. So I was very happy when he was restored as the king of Cambodia. Thank you, Professor. That's all.
Thank you for sharing. Yeah.
Thank you, Ma'am Gemma. Would you like to add anything, Mr. Duong?
Um.
A reaction?
Yeah. I mean, that's a good that's good that she share most of her experience, and yes, like when she raised at the beginning that the French probably thought that he was very young, around like 18, 19 years old when the French installed him as a king, and
Mm-hmm.
then he the one who fought back very strongly and get
Mm-hmm.
independent for Cambodia, uh, without any fighting, which is completely different from what happened next to Cambodia, close to Cambodia, Vietnam. That Vietnam uh, have to fight in the war against the French until 1954 to end the colonization. But Prince Sihanouk, King Sihanouk can do it bloodlessly. That's a good point to raise that I haven't make in the presentation, and she add to this, and thank you for that. And yeah, talking about political, uh, like how Prince Sihanouk has been dethroned from not dethroned, overthrown from being a, 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 a head of state in 1970 was also because the Vietnam War. One thing that have Vietnamese troop, the communist Vietnamese in Cambodia, and also the economic slowdown seen Cambodia under Sihanouk cut off the relation with the U.S. and the foreign aid from the U.S. was also cut down. That's why the economics back then was slowing down until at the end, on not only the economic, the political situation, the economic situation, and the instability in the country lead to the overthrow of the prince in 1970s. Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you again, Ma'am Gemma. Uh, the next question is in the chat box, and it comes from Joel Bernasor. So he asks, you said that the Independence Day of Cambodia is perceived differently by the different regimes. Currently, what is the perception of the Independence Day of Cambodia, particularly for the youth?
Right. Thank you for the question. Um, uh, for the youth, for young people, because of the Independence Day very much connected to the late kings, and the current king, I would say, is not as popular as the late kings. So the way in which youth respond to the Independence Day is not really that enthusiastic as I would say back to the time of the 50s and the 60s, if I can see uh, from the film and from the reading and newspaper in which the enthusiastic or the people celebrating the day very strongly. For now, because kind of the veil of the democracy, seeing that the monarchy is not really very much important in politics, so it seemed to be less interested to the youth. But at the same time, young people also still pay respect to the late kings, Norodom Sihanouk. Um, and I would say, yes, still some young people post on Facebook. I would that I can see that what the indication I would say that still a number of people post on Facebook to celebrate the day, but it's not really as much as what people celebrating the 7th century.
We have another question here. It's in the Q&A box. And well, it's not really about independence. It's more a question about the difference between the Cambodian and the monarchy of the United Kingdom. So it comes from Roxanne Remulla. I mean, of course, if you're free to answer or not, okay. But the question is, what are the similarities and differences of both the government and monarchy of Cambodia and the UK?
All right. I think I have a little knowledge about UK monarchies.
Okay.
I know that the Queen Elizabeth is, I think that what I think, very respectful to people in the UK, very respectful to the Queens, and would say the Queen might be still very popular among all the people in the UK, comparing to our king, because let's say I don't want to comment on that much, but if we say the popularity of the late king, what he have done, for example, he granted the name as a father of independence. He led the country during the 50 and the 60 as what we normally call as the island of the peace, island of peace. So he quite have a lot of achievement in his life. But for our current king, he quite quiet. He have no power to the politics as it is stated in the constitution. And so Cambodian monarchy, as many people already compared to Thai monarchies. Since the late king of Thai passed away, the current king also not really popular as the late king, and it's they compare it to Cambodia. But what Cambodia would, I would say, that better than Thai in what, in which this our king had no scandal. I would say like that. Yeah, I can't answer this much because I don't know much about the monarchies in the UK. Yeah.
Thank you. I think we have time for only two more questions. And the next one comes from Jimmy Cipriano Uy Jr. from Taguig. So he says, Cambodia is one of the best Asian countries with a colorful history, and it is known as the land of spectacular historical landmarks. And his question has to do with how students absorb and learn the tragic events of Cambodian history, like the events of when it was under the French and the horrors of the Pol Pot regime.
Oh, thank you for the question. Yeah, but it's very hard to give the answer to this. First, I would like to say this. National textbook, this is the way in which young people learn history of Democratic Kampuchea. So in national textbook, this is a narrative from the government. And they talk about the Khmer rule as the evil, as a very cruel, which is true. And also in order to link how the importance of the 7th century 1979 is very important, because the Khmer rule, living in the Khmer rule regime, is forceful starvation, killings. So people, young people learn from this. But at the same time, also the movement in which I would say mostly from the theory of opposition party try to discredit the current government, saying that what happened during the time of the Khmer Rouge linked to Vietnam. That's why they would say that what Vietnam have done to Cambodia, for example, Vietnam, the one who joined with the current government, some main leader of the current government to overthrow the Khmer rule. But the opposition have another narrative saying that Vietnam actually the one who support the Khmer rule at the beginning and the Khmer rule at the end. And this makes young people into a doubt about what really happened. So they have a two contrast narrative. And then because social media really go very quickly for sharing those information, then some young people don't believe that what happened at Tu Slang. If you know, Tu Slang is the former F-21 prison during the Khmer rule, in which like thousands of people have been killed there, detained and interrogated and killed there. And even saying that Tu Slang is just made by Vietnam, this is quite a denial of the Cambodian history. Yeah, maybe you have some follow up if you want, but I don't know how much I could answer to the question.
I think Ma'am Gemma wants to react.
All right.
Yes, ma'am.
She's still much.
Oh, there could be a problem with the connection. Anyway, I'll proceed to the last question. So, what is your opinion on Hun Sen's 35-year rule on Cambodia? What does the Cambodian people perceive this as from an anonymous attendee?
Sorry,
what is your opinion? What is your opinion on Hun Sen's 35-year rule on Cambodia?
Mm-hmm.
And how is it perceived by the people?
Okay. Yeah, I raised different perspective on him. Have been ruled Cambodia for 35 years. First, the supporters, those who support him, saying that he is a very strong man who could control Cambodia from chaotic, from civil war. And the supporter would say that Cambodia need that kind of strong man. That's why he had been named as the strong man of Cambodia. Once, yeah. And from himself, he said repeatedly that as long as people vote for him, he stay in power. Yes, that. But for some other who opposed to him, would say that he the one who ruled the country for long and call him as a dictator, and who do not share power with the others. And the latest one is that when the former opposition party has been dissolved, that's how the reaction from the international community saying that Cambodian democracy like backward is backwards. To me, I had to say about this. Once, when he was in power in 1985, it was the time we was under on the civil wars, and back then we have no choice. He the one who has been installed as a prime minister, and then when later after the UN intervention, we have the election. So when we have the election, he was elected as the prime minister. And what way he have done to be elected is another question. But he have been elected until now as the prime minister of Cambodia. The question is that the way he rule and make a network for his power is another question.
Okay. I think Ma'am Gemma's
Oh,
microphone
yes,
is working now.
Professor Duong, what about China? Is it eating up Cambodia now?
Okay. All right. What? Yes.
There are
That,
big interest in Sihanoukville.
right. If you visit SIHNAOUK like 10 years ago or 15 years ago, and you visit SIHNAOUK right now, it's completely different.
Yeah, I
SIHNAOUK,
probably won't recognize it.
yeah, SIHNAOUK will become a Chinatown.
Oh dear.
Yeah, and do you know that just few weeks ago, a former minister, the foreign minister of Singapore, accused Cambodia and Laos as not loyal to ASEAN because Cambodia.
Yes, I know Cambodia didn't even support us in our claims. That's true.
So
The other ASEAN countries are sort of disappointed in Cambodia now.
that when it goes to the topics about South China Sea, and from the standpoint of Cambodian government, that Cambodian government don't want to involve in this dispute. That's why Cambodian government don't want to what's called want to make any claim that
Yes.
Cambodian government support or not support. But when Cambodians stay silent, or what the Cambodian government say neutral, ASEAN would say that this is the way in which Cambodians support China already.
Yes, yes. I'm sure Dr. Fernando will agree.
Okay. Well, unfortunately, it's already 3 o'clock and we have to end the webinar. This is really a very interesting topic, and I wish we had more time to discuss. We have, in fact, a few more questions, but this is all our time permits. So, well, first, Ma'am Gemma, thank you for your insights. They're really very enlightening.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, professors and Professor Duong. I hope you come to the Philippines soon.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I've been in Philippines once and want to visit again.
Right.
Okay. Professor Duong, do you have any parting words for our audience?
Oh, I would like to thank Dr. Fernando for inviting me for this talk, and I'm very happy that many people like there's question raised about this topic, and actually, if we have time, I am happy to discuss too. But yes, we have a limited time for this, and thank you for participate in this talk, and hope you gain some perspective for me. Basically, yeah. Thank you.
Okay. So before we close the webinar, I'd like to invite our guests to our next webinar, which is on November 20, on Reclaiming the City, Stories and Critical Perspectives from Southeast Asia, a webinar in partnership with the University Science Malaysia. And this is November 20, 3 o'clock to 5 o'clock p.m. So once again, on behalf of the Southeast Asia Research Center and Hub, I would like to extend our deep felt gratitude to Mr. Keo Duong for sharing his time, his expertise, and for addressing the questions of our members of the audience. And to the members of the audience, thank you very much for joining us this afternoon, and I hope you will join us in our next webinar. Thank you and have a nice day.
Thank you.